Well, my name is Commander Ashok. I'm married to one wife, and I have two children. Interestingly, my mother's an Andhraite, if I speak Telugu. My father is a Tamilian, so I speak Tamil. My wife is a Malayali, so I speak Malayalam. And I'm a domicile of Karnataka. So I'm hoping that one day they'll look for a PM from pure South India. And here I am. My son does his dental. He's doing his final year BDS, and he often tells me I have to study more than the other doctors. And I tell him that some pains are physical, some pains are mental. But the one that is both physical and mental is dental. It is yin and yang together that you go through. Am I right? Well, today I'm not going to talk about myself, but I'm going to begin talking about the stories. I'm a human trafficking expert. I've rescued about close to 7,000 plus women and children across various countries. My passion is that. Human trafficking is an organized crime. There are 7 organized crimes in the world, and human trafficking is one of them. And human trafficking by itself has 7 kinds of crime. And one of them I'm going to discuss today is bonded labor. So it will be educative, but I'm also going to share about 2 stories of lives of people who have made a transformation. And I titled my topic today as Breaking the Chains, okay, which is very resonating to the theme that you have today. In my growing years, as I grew up, I had a problem at home. The village that I grew up in, close to Visakhapatnam, had a current problem. I know you're modern school and therefore you don't use the word current, you call it electricity. But in my growing years, we used to call it current. I'm sure some of you belong to my generation, still use the word called current. We had a problem with current in my house. And whenever the current would go, there was a regiment military drill that we had to follow. And the military drill is, my dad will scream from the top of his voice and say, current poiche, current is gone. Go and check from the neighbor's house whether they have a current or not. And lo and behold, I would run, knock the door of the neighbor and say, do you have current? Current ruka? And if he had said yes, my dad will have a heart attack. And if he said no, I will come back very peacefully because my dad is very happy. It is not just the current has gone in my house, it's gone in everybody's house. And somebody will fix this problem. I don't have to fix the problem. And today I'm going to talk about a topic which is bonded labor, which is a topic which we feel everybody needs to fix. I'm going to quote from a very well-known book that I've got impressed called Locus Effect, written by Gary Hogan. He says this, without the world noting the locus of a common, criminal, violent, and are right now ravaging the lives and the dreams of the millions of our poorest neighbors. Right now you're sitting here, women and children are being trafficked, sold for 3 meals a day, and they've been put into bonded and chained in some of the bonded labor rescues that we have done. As much as you call this a modern era, bonded labor continues to be a reality. Here is a story of Varalakshmi, an amazing woman who was bonded. 2008, she was rescued. She was in the darkness, in a season of lack of freedom, does not have the ability to buy things, to do things, to look after her family. All of you at the end of this TEDx has the freedom to go back to your houses. She didn't have that freedom. She was rescued in 2008. Within a span of a year, she sprung back and she said, I am not going to allow the dominion or the period of darkness in my life, who's been subjected to every kind of exploitation, from labor exploitation to sexual exploitation to verbal exploitation to even hours of work which could extend as much as 16 to 18 hours a day that she was put to subject. But she took up a challenge to say, I won't be buckled down by what the life has offered to me, I'm going to see transformation. And within 365 days, she sprung up back to action. And within few years in 2017, she's now a champion working with the Block Development Officers Department in one of the districts of your own state and the neighboring Andhra Pradesh. Today, she's not just looking at what happened to me, but today Varalakshmi represents a voice to the millions and the thousands of people who are still subjected to this kind of brutality into day-to-day life. And she not only just thinks for herself, she's become a community transformer who's not only issued Aadhaar cards to people, she's went about getting certificates for children, she went about doing things which has called her to be a champion of an association called the Release Bonded Labor Association. And her story is a story that I'm sharing with you today, that she is one such hero who moved from subjected, chained bondage to a modern day freedom that you and me enjoy. I just thought it's good for us at this juncture, maybe to take a pause and have a retrospect to your own heart. As you sit today, enjoying the luxury and the joy of freedom, thousands and millions remain in chains. And what better audience can this be? That we have got a generation that is growing up, and you could be that voice to make a transformation as you grew up in your careers, whatever you would become. Some of you could be a president of this country as you move forward. At the age of 53, I'm aspiring to be a prime minister. I'm sure you would love to be a president. And you would be one of them as you move forward. But I'm sharing the story of a transformed life who broke the chains of bondage, set herself free from the dominion of darkness, and walked into a place of a total freedom guaranteed with the constitution rights. Bonded labor by subject has a different kinds of mindset. I'm going to share to you what happened to bonded labor as part of an organized crime in the last 200 years. It began as a social need. There was an agricultural need that propagated. And there were a bunch of students, there was a bunch of community that called bonded labor as a social need. How can communities develop? How could economic growth happen without a community coming together? And therefore, a bunch of people were brought in, made to live together, restricted in freedom, but they felt it was a need of how community develops. But eventually, within 40 years, there were a bunch of students like you in Gurukuls who began to make a voice, and the voice remained unheard through the decades of darkness. And they kept saying, though it began as a social need, it is a social evil. Today, through talks like this, you're pronouncing, I like the way the previous speaker spoke about a donut costs you 20 push-ups. Okay? I'm sure there'll be still who will still prefer to do the 20 push-ups and still eat the donut. Correct? So just want to say social evil was a voice which began with a bunch of students who raised their voice. And they formed different campaigns. They didn't have a social media network those days, but it transited. It took 40 years from a need to it becoming a social evil. But somewhere in the early 60s, it moved after close to about 60, 70 years, it became a socio-economic crime. And people not only exploited women and children for this need, but they also found that there's a financial support that I could make out of trafficking a girl or a man or a woman or a child for labor exploitation or other forms of exploitation, sexual exploitation, child labor exploitation, or a typical child bonded labor exploitations. Generations remained in this bonded world because it had a social need which was coupled into an economic gain, and people didn't mind. In the early 70s, the government of India called it out by an act called the Bonded Labor Abolition Act and said this socially abolished crime has to be taken action. It is in the 1970s. But still, bonded labor continued. That today, we call it an organized crime after close to 50 years after the Abolition Act has come. And it is now part of the new Trafficking in Persons Bill. And bonded labor continues to thrive and the look in the corners, and the recent news that you heard in a country like Switzerland, which you have heard about the news that had happened, who were jailed and imprisoned, billionaires who subjected people to bonded labor. The stories are real. And I know this is a subject that will keep you awake after lunch, but I've shared to you a story of a typical traditional bonded labor who's Varalakshmi. But young students, today bonded labor has taken a new form. And the new form is organized human trafficking. And as part of human trafficking, every day, children are constantly groomed. Students like you are constantly groomed. At homes, through your internet, social media platforms that you use, your phones, your gadgets that you use. They're constantly groomed. They're groomed to an extent that eventually you provide an economic revenue to the human trafficking crime, which contributes, as per the records, 150 billion USD. And today, I'm going to request you to be careful, because I'm going to share to you the next story of a BTech engineer whom I rescued in June, who was trafficked in 2023. A BTech engineer got a job offer like any one of us who gets a job offer, taken to Dubai, and from the Middle East, he was looked after and then eventually transported to Thailand, and from Thailand, he was moved to Myanmar to do the scamming network. Many of you must have received phone calls that you're getting a police call or this. This is a scamming network, a BTech engineer. So what is it that has changed? When I started to work in this space, I always felt human trafficking was something subjected to a certain caste or exclusive to children and women. No, the modern forms of bonded labor, subjecting even graduates, well-educated children, to forms of exploitation which deal with restriction of movement and confinement to small quarters. And here is a story of this gentleman, Rajesh, Binu Rajesh from down south. And 2001 year, look at his hands. He was chained. This is not as far as 20 years, 30 years ago. And we've rescued him recently in July 2024 with the help of the government of India in Myanmar and the law enforcement agencies. And he's come back as a transformed story. So why am I sharing these stories to you? Why am I asking you to think on these grinds? One is, first of all, you can say it's something, a very old, stale subject. It's irrelevant. And if I don't share the second story to you, you may conclude that it is something happens in some faraway corners. No, ladies and gentlemen, it's happening right now in the corridors that you live, in the apartments where you stay, the places of your employment, schools, colleges, institutions of care. All these are subjected to the modern forms of slavery. And here is a story of this gentleman, Rajesh, that I've shared with you, crossed various countries by a typical job offer that was given to him. I'm sure at the end of your school and tenure, many of you would like to pick up a job. My caution to you is beware, because modern forms of crime are lurking around at every nook and corner, and it could be waiting in your inbox for you to click, or your social media platform on which we are so addicted to. And here's a video of Rajesh that I just wanted to play.
மதிப்பிற்கும் மரியாதைக்கும் உரிய திரு கமாண்டர் அசோக் மற்றும் அவர்கள் குழுவினர் அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். நான் மனித வணிகம் என்ற காரில் சிக்கிக்கொண்டு தவித்துக் கொண்டிருந்த பொழுது என்னை கண்டுபிடித்து மீட்டுக் கொண்டது மட்டுமல்லாமல் என்னை சுயமரியாதையுடனும் கண்ணியத்துடன் வாழ உதவி செய்த கமாண்டர் அசோக் மற்றும் அவர்கள் குழுவினர் அனைவருக்கும் என் உள்ளத்தின் ஆழத்திலிருந்து நன்றி செலுத்திக் கொள்கிறேன்.
Who now expresses his gratitude to what has happened. As I conclude, I want to leave 3 V's for you today. At the end of this talk, if you picked up, wherever you are, whatever segment that you are placed in of the society, I hope that you will catch hold of these 3 V's for you to implement. First V, start becoming victim-centric. Compassion plays a very important role in the life of your growth and career. Gratitude is an external expression, but have compassion for people who are less privileged, like the way Gary said at the beginning of this. As you're sitting together, hidden somewhere, exploitation happens. And if you're part of that exploitation, if you happen to see an exploitation, I would say have compassion for those who have subjected to these kind of exploitation by mere humans, not by animals. And I hope and I request and I pledge and I plead and I ask you today, as students of this wonderful institutions and all the audience who are listening, whichever facet of life that you exist, become a person who's victim-centric, who has deep compassion for victims of human trafficking, because they are subjected to a high level of indignity and loss of self-esteem. And it takes sometimes months and years through trauma care and counselors to restore back. Second, be a vocal voice like platforms like this. Speak about it with courage. Don't have to hide that it is not a reality. Speak about it. Become a voice wherever you are. If you tomorrow are CEO of a company, make it a bonded labor free. Tell in my place there is no exploitation. We ensure ethical sourcing of staff. Become a person who will make a vocal voice and is concerned for this. And the third way, volunteer to be involved in eradicating the crime of bonded labor, which is a subset of a most heinous crime called organized crime. Volunteer, sign up, come across, put a shoulder together and say, I am in. And one of the good things that we have started through this work is we started something called anti-human trafficking clubs in schools and colleges. And that has been led by students, young students, college students, who are now passionate to ensure that none among them are exploited to this heinous crime. I just want to leave these 3 V's for you. Become victim-centric. If you have a voice, be vocal about it. And third, volunteer to end this heinous crime that is happening every day. And the statistics can be horrifying, that it says every 8 minutes a girl goes missing or a child goes missing in our country. And a missing child ends up into exploitation of a highest degree, which means she or he may have to do things against the self-esteem and the dignity of the life for which she or he was created. With that, I want to end. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed this afternoon.